Our next speaker is Stu Fogarty, Managing Director of Duketon Mining.
Thanks, Hilary, and thanks everyone for turning up to this session. I know it's a tough time of the day and also a tough time in the market as well, but we're all here and we're all talking about our stories. Look, I'm here to talk about the Duketon project. We are a nickel sulphide project and we own two resources up in the northern part of the Duketon belt, north of Laverton. I'll just step you through the cautionary statement. That's on the ASX platform for anybody that wishes to read through the details. The company's relatively simple as far as structure goes. We're focused up in that area, which is 350 kilometres north of Kalgoorlie, essentially. We are focused on nickel sulphides predominantly. We have two resources up there that are JORC compliant. We're continuing to work on those and we're continuing to do exploration around those two resources as well, which I'll take you through. The capital structure of the company, we started life almost 10 years ago with 85 million shares on issue. We wake up today with just over 120 million shares on issue. We've got essentially $16 million of cash and investments, which is broken down into about $12 million of cash and $4 million of investments, which those investments we do actively manage on behalf of the company. And most of them have been born out of project funds into other companies that we turn into shareholdings and then liquidate accordingly as we see fit. Overall, the EV value is just under $40 million. So we've got almost 100,000 nickel tonnes sitting in that vehicle with that EV. We've got a really good register as far as the shareholder base goes. There's a guy called Kerry Hermanis who's probably known to a lot of the audience around here that owns just under 20% of the register. He's a long-term holder, loves nickel, great shareholder at the end of the day. We've got another institution which sits just under 10%, and then importantly directors and management sitting at about 10% of the holders as well. The remainder of the register is dominated by retail, but predominantly high net worths and other parties which have come through a number of different sources, but are very good shareholders and very long-term view on things, which is helpful in these markets. Share price performance over the last 12 months, we've oscillated from as low as 25 cents and as high as 42 cents or thereabouts, but that's quite normal for us. Low liquidity because of that shareholding base, but the share price does move in that range up and down. Pretty simple structure from a board perspective. Seamus is a corporate lawyer. He sits on a number of boards now across ASX Juniors. He's spent many years in China and living in China and developing a legal business up there. I'm a geologist, as Hilary referred to, and Heath Halliwell's also an exploration geologist, but very well seasoned in the junior exploration space and has worked across companies like IGO, Doré, and more recently Capricorn as well. So quite a good resource, but also very simple and very straightforward board as well. Look, the highlights, I won't go through the demand scenario. I think IGO covered that and we've covered that in a number of other presentations today as well. The upside that we have is that there's significant amounts of exploration upside within the Duketon belt, and we hold a large amount of tenure there, both 100% owned by the company and through a nickel rights joint venture with Regis Resources, which is a gold mining company in the same area. So we've managed to maintain and develop a large footprint within the Duketon belt, and we've got access to all of the nickel and associated minerals within that tenement package while still maintaining the overhead costs at a fairly low level. Look, we've got a number of studies underway. We've published a scoping study previously, which is just a toll treating and trucking and toll treating arrangement for Rosie, which is one of those deposits. And the reason we looked at that is because it's relatively high grade on a nickel equivalent basis, and that grade's 3.27% nickel equivalent, and it's made up of nickel, copper, and a number of PGEs. So it's a complex ore body, but it's a nickel sulphide basis to it, and it's got a very healthy tail of high value PGEs in it as well. We're looking at concentrator on site, whether that works or not. We understand that the toll treating arrangement does work, but the concentrator on site option also looks at bringing in C2 as another production centre within that package. It's a very straightforward package of rocks. Package of tenements. We're unencumbered by any royalties, off-takes or anything else at this point. So we can run our own race, and as a function of that, we get a lot of conversations going with a lot of companies because there's lots of options in front of us. Just to give you a little bit of geography around where we are, that's our tenements in dark black, outlined in the dark black outlines. A number of our major prospects in the dark blue call-out boxes, and Rosie and C2 is our main two resources. Just to give a bit of geography around, the main access route is through that brown road that comes up from Laverton. So to get to our projects, it's just a bit over 100 kilometres up that road. That's a very well-maintained road, and those gold mines, or those call-outs, the gold deposits in that map, they're Regis Resources gold mines, and all of the infrastructure for the 10 million tonnes of processing that they do each year comes in and out on that road. So it's a very good access, it's a very good bit of infrastructure for us, and it basically gets us within a kilometre of any one of our projects at any point in time. I've just drawn in a number of the other nickel assets in the Agnew-Walluna belt on the left-hand side of that slide. That's a significant amount of nickel resources out through there, and we're sitting about 130 kilometres as the crow flies away from that. We're a separate belt, but I think that's slowly developing over time. And historically, the Mount Windara deposit, the remaining resource there is about 150,000 nickel tonnes. Up in the Duketon package, there's 100,000 nickel tonnes of metal, and then further to the north in the Mount Fisher package, you could probably round that off to being another 150,000 nickel tonnes as well. So I think that whole belt is starting to develop into a more regional play along the lines of the Agnew-Walluna belt. And we're seeing multiple discoveries and deposits along there, and I think that's part of the ongoing story for all of the companies that are involved in that space. Just zooming right in, so this is looking right in at the C2, the Rosie and the C2 resources. The image on the right is the geology in the background, the green rocks being mafic rocks, the purple or light blue rocks are the ultramafic host rocks to the nickel deposits. Both C2 and Rosie are sitting there. They're about 2 kilometres apart. They both sit on the same granted mining tenement, which is outlined in light grey in that image. So these projects are relatively de-risked as far as permitting and further steps that we need to get towards actually mining these deposits. Rosie, as I said, is a smaller, so 2.8 million tonnes at 3.27% nickel equivalent, and C2 is a lower grade but larger tonnage deposit as well, and both sit around that 50,000 nickel tonne scale. Both of them are open at depth and open along strike, and I'll take you through those in a little bit more detail. So in summary, 100,000 tonnes of nickel metal, 14,000 tonnes of copper, and interestingly about 250,000 ounces of PGEs, and in particular in Rosie, that's sitting at sort of 2.5 to 3 grams per tonne PGEs, which is an interesting number in itself. The scoping study that we did on Rosie, it's a couple of years old now. Interestingly, it was done at a nickel price of $8 a pound, which at the time we thought was spot on and probably a little bit conservative. We've run right up as a nickel price into the plus $10, $11 a pound, and then come back down. And I think we're sitting around $8.50 at the moment. So this is still relevant as far as the numbers go. It is highly leveraged to the nickel price, like most nickel deposits are, and we range that between $7.50 and $8.50 for the sake of this study. The numbers that I point out to most people is the MPV is highly leveraged to that nickel price, and every time that the nickel price goes up, that MPV goes up significantly. And probably more importantly for this project, under a toll treating arrangement, about every 50 cents increase in the nickel price is worth about $50 million to the cash flow of this particular deposit, which is just shows you the leverage that comes with that. And if we get back to $10, $11 pound numbers and then run that through this model, it comes out with a significant money. Thank you. One of the interesting aspects of the whole scoping study is that the way to get into it is a simple portal and a decline, and that's estimates are about $18 million, and we've just stress tested that recently with respect to the current inflation and current costs. And that comes in just under $20 million still. So it's a very simple and low-cost project to get into. And it's because it is just simply a portal decline into the first cut of ore and then trucking the product off-site. It does make a nice product. It produces around 6,000 nickel equivalent tonnes, a combination of nickel, copper and PGEs each year, and that's about 300,000 tonnes at about just over 2% nickel equivalent. There's just a quick video, if it'll work. This is all the drilling on the project, you can see. The red outlines are the plus 1% nickel marks. That's the wireframe around Rosie. It shows you the size and the geometry of that. It's about 1 kilometre long on strike and goes down to about 700 metres of depth, but that's limited by the drilling, as you can see. The scoping studies had the full stope outlines produced on it. You can see where the decline is in blue. The orange plates are EM plates, so there's a significant amount of anomalism there, which we think is drives the exploration process a little bit. And out to the left there, we're seeing another ore body, or another position that we like. C2 is a little bit different, big, thick, stacked loads, fits into an open pit and really nicely because of the geometry. 8 million tonnes at just under 0.6% copper, high sulphur content in it, makes a very nice concentrate, as I'll show you. And you can see that the infrastructure that's required around this project's pretty minimal, and we come back out onto that Banja road that I was talking about within about 1 kilometre of newly developed road from those two project areas. This is a long section of Rosie. So to the left is north and to the right is south broadly. It's not quite on that plane, but good enough for this conversation. All of the pink dots on that plan are plus 10 metre nickel percent equivalent. So that's what we use as a rule of thumb of what we believe is going to be economic or very close to it. And as you saw in that scoping study, all of that gets consumed through that mining process. This is more about the exploration upside, and you can see the limit of drilling, and this is all of the pierce points within the Rosie domain. And when we drill, and I'll draw your eye to the bottom right-hand corner of this long section, but we're continuing to see these same 3+ metres at 3+% nickel plus associated other commodities consistently through this whole deposit. And with more drilling, this will just continue to grow. So we have great expectations that it will get bigger and bigger as we drill it more and more. And I'll show you another graph that'll just describe that a little bit further. There's a little bit of a transition zone at the top, so it is a strip profile. And so the mining study, the first bit of ore is actually straight into the fresh rock. So there's a component which we haven't declared in any resource, but there's a component of the ore body that sticks up into that transition zone, which we're just considering how we mine that, how we might process it, because it gets a little bit complicated because it is slightly oxidised. But there's an option there that we're just trying to work through, and whether you can put an open pit on the top of Rosie or not, and whether that works better than going directly underground on it. This is what the drill core looks like. On the right is a historical hole, one of the better holes, obviously, but 9 metres at 5% nickel. They're big, thick pods of ore when we get into them. Very, very clean from a mineralogy perspective, and loaded full of PGEs, as you can see through there as well. On the left is a more recent hole, so I think this was from one of our last drill programs, still hitting that 3 metres at 3% nickel plus a number of grams per tonne PGEs, which is a significant part of the value proposition in here. But it looks like a fantastic ore body when you're drilling into it. And I think good geometry for mining, and it's a pretty simple and straightforward story at the end of the day. C2, the cross section on the right there, you can see it's typified, and you saw in the 3D image that I put up, it's typified by these 10+ metre intercepts of ranging from anywhere from 0.5% nickel through to 1.5% nickel, but big thick intercepts consistently. And then the loads appear to be structurally stacked on top of each other, which makes it very nice from a strip ratio, from an open pit perspective. And we've been running some scenarios on that. The graph on the left, that's just to show a little bit of the history of Duketon, and we started off as a nickel sulphide exploration company. 2015, we shut down the nickel sulphide exploration because of the market and turned our attention to gold. And so for those subsequent years between that and 2020, we did no nickel exploration at all and didn't drill a single hole focused on nickel. Once we got back to that, that graph's just there to show you the continual growth. The more we drill on the nickel side of things, the more that resource grows and we convert it, and it just continues to deliver for us on both of those deposits. Met work, we've done some very simple but straightforward met work on both C2 and Rosie. Rosie comes out, it's a great deposit. You saw the drill core there. It's a very simple metallurgical flow sheet. We can look at nickel, just a straight nickel con. We can do a bulk con, which is a combined nickel-copper con. And we've also shown that we can pull out the PGEs through a gravity circuit separately. And that's all done just to facilitate some of the conversations with any offtake partner that we might be talking about how do we get value for the PGEs in that equation, and how do we still hit some of their marks with respects to the quality of the concentrate they need. Excuse me. The C2 deposit's actually it responds really well to metallurgy. It's actually a high iron sulphide deposit, and so it produces a very nice saleable concentrate with a high iron content in it. And in fact, the last couple of rounds of met work, we were actually rejecting some of the nickel sulphides because it was diluting down the nickel grade, and that was one of the methods that we did just to bring the nickel grade up while still keeping a very high iron to MgO grade. So it's a very nice, neat ore body, and it responds really well to the concentrating. The other thing we have done is actually produced a nickel sulphate. That's the concentrate on the left from C2. So we've had one trial, and we're actually underway in another trial with some Rosie concentrate as well. Pressure oxidation vessel, for whoever hasn't seen them before, that's that silver vessel at the bottom of the diagram on the right. It's pretty simple. You put the concentrate in there, you put some water in with it, you heat it up, bring it up to pressure, inject some oxygen into it, and then it starts to convert the nickel out of the concentrate and get it into solution as a nickel sulphate. And those vessels at the top, those 5 vessels in the middle of the diagram, that's every half an hour from that test that we did with the C2 concentrate, and it essentially the majority of the nickel, and high 90% of it, go into solution almost immediately within this routine. It's very, very simple, and the residue, which is the red substance in the bottom left-hand corner there, that's what's left over after you've got all the nickel, copper and cobalt out into solution as a sulphate. And ultimately the container on your right is the product that we sent off for further testing for sulphate, and then obviously talking about developing it into a precursor product for a PCAM material. Now with the PGEs going down this route, and Rosie, what we're expecting is that the PGEs will report into that residue, the red substance, and we can simply concentrate those out of that once we've got it, so we can separate the nickel, copper and cobalt out into solution, and then the PGEs out into that residue, and just concentrate that out as a separate product. So it's relatively simple at this point, and we're just going through that high-level work with Rosie at the moment. Exploration upside, this is a magnetic image, so in the background the colour is the magnetic response, and then in the middle, which is actually the bulge, which is that ultramafic rocks in the previous image that I put up, that was the purple or light blue stuff. That's the inversion of the magnetic data, and that's just trying to approximate some of the geometries within that ultramafic body, and it's not just a simple one big lump of rocks. It's a mix, and we think there's some repeats in there. There's some more prospective contacts than just the one contact that we see Rosie and C2 sitting on, and we're seeing some evidence of that in some of the historical drilling and some of the more recent drilling that we're doing. And a couple of those call-out holes down through there are showing low-grade nickel, but nickel on the contact. We're seeing sulphides, we're seeing PGs in there, so we're seeing all the right genetic material. We're just not quite getting into the right location about where the next major part of the mineralisation is, but we feel like we're very close to that. And then as we work our ways more south and to the east into that bulge, that volume of rocks becomes quite significant. It's kilometres by kilometres. And we've got a lot of investigation to do in there still, and you can see a number of those drill holes, 20 odd metres at 0.5% to a little bit more of nickel sitting in there, but in sulphides, importantly. So there's lots of indications that there's upside within that whole ultramafic package. Right to the north of the project, and this is a little bit different, but this is some work we've just done more recently, and we picked up this tenure trying to chase the attenuated signature of the Duketon belt to the north, up towards the Kintera ground. We identified these two large mafic intrusions, so just to give you a sense of scale, on the left-hand image in the red box, that dark image is one of the mafic intrusions. That's about 6 to 7 kilometres along strike, so it's quite a significant body. We had a look at that. We liked what it looked like conceptually. Went through some historical data, found an old hole that BHP had drilled, a big regional hole. One hole had hit that. Had some low-level indications of nickel and copper in it, which just simply indicated that it was a mafic rock, and it was logged as a mafic rock at the bottom of that hole. Subsequent to that, we went out there, conducted some surface EM over the top of it, got some background anomalies, which are in the right-hand image there, the white rods essentially, and then more recently we've come back with an air core rig and run some lines over the top of this, really just trying to get an understanding of what all the geology looks like. Like all these things, it's a little bit more complicated than what the geophysics tells you, but we're seeing mafic rocks, granitic rocks, and a combination of all of those, and how they're put together. We'll slowly work that out. A little bit of background sulphides here and there in the rocks as well, which piques our interest a little bit. And those assays should be coming out in the next few weeks. But it's an interesting project, and it's slightly different to the traditional komatiite-hosted nickel deposits of all the rest of the Yilgarn. But I quite like it, and these things are always big if they come together. Other projects, look, we do, and we've had this model within Duketon constantly, and that's part of that investments that I talked about, the $4 million that we still have. Within investments, and what we've done predominantly is picked up tenure as we go, as it becomes available, as we come up with a good idea. The team's sort of encouraged to come up with an idea, and we'll kind of shoot first and aim later on that, and so we'll try and pick up a tenement, and if we don't like it, we'll drop it again. If we do like it, we'll work it up to the next stage of technical assessment. Here's a set of things that we've done in the background: Barley, Otways, Doris, Stevens and Fisher South. Lake Mackay is one of the more recent ones, but they're just concepts that the team's had. And Barley, we've advanced a little bit more, and I'll do one more slide on that just to show you where we got to on that, because we came in with one concept and it's evolved into something else. Otways, and all of these were open ground. Okay, so we haven't had to deal into these, we haven't had to buy them, we haven't had to do anything, we've just picked up the tenure. Otways has got a fence of drill holes over a couple hundred metres. We're seeing multiple tens of metres of 0.7% copper in fresh rock over 2 or 3 different fences of holes. Looks like a really good project. It's sitting up in the Pilbara, in amongst all those lithium deposits as well, but it looks like a great gold and copper play at the end of the day. We've got a lot of work to do on that, and then we've got to decide what we want to do with it. Doris, interestingly, of all things, it's a highest grade uranium play in the middle of WA. It was open ground. We picked it up when nobody liked uranium. It continues to sit in the portfolio, and we'll continue to work that up for what it is. At a low level, low expenditure intent, but just try and get our head around it and see what to do with it next. Also has a bit of rare earth potential in there. Stevens is on the deflector Golden Grove trend. It's a copper gold play. It's got a couple of hits of copper, silver, gold, and a little bit of base metals in there as well, but it's a very interesting little play. Fisher South is a gold play, and Lake Mackay, as said, it's a niobium and rare earth play out in the Arunta. Just talking about Barley, though, in a little bit of detail. We'll get back to the nickel in a second, but we went in here looking up in that left-hand arm of that greenstone belt. Towards the north of that is the Penny West deposit. It's a small high-grade position. We picked up this ground as it became available, looking for small high-grade gold positions if they're possible. It's turned in, and you can see some of the historical numbers out there. We picked up some anomalous data in some fine fraction work that was anomalous in lithium. Piqued our interest. We got out there, did some field work. We've identified some pegmatites. We've got some fertility analysis going on, which suggests that it's looking pretty good. And there's indicators all around for lithium. Haven't nutted out that problem or solved that problem yet, but it's piqued our interest, and we're sitting in a pretty good belt as far as lithium goes as well. There's some rare earths in some of the historical holes, and there's also some base metals that have been hit up in the northern part of the belt as well. So it's a technically really interesting area, and it's an example of what we do with these other projects. So we're working this up, and we'll figure out whether it's a core Duketon project or it's something that we do spin out into something else. What we've got coming up, we've got assays coming up for the air core drilling at Tate. We've got met work going underway for the POX work with Rosie, and just trying to work out how that path works with the PGEs. We've been constantly working on this Rosie mining study, and we've also been looking at what does a concentrator look like on site, and we're sort of trying to combine that and the thinking with C2 or without C2 or what that does. We'll progress Barley project, and we'll progress a number of these other projects that we've got, and work them up and decide what to do with them, but actively manage them. Look, in summary, we've got lots of project work going on. We think we've got very good exploration upside, and corporately we're in a really strong position, especially in this market right now. We're not going away, and we'll take advantage of this as it goes on. Thanks, everyone.